Commonwealth's attorneys and I have concluded that the NCAA sanctions were overreaching and unlawful.
Someone's got development product, and you and I, as a consumer, are going to want to buy.
The country needs a comprehensive energy plan.
Good morning and welcome to For the Record. Hope your summer is off to a good start. Our vacation's over, and that means it's time for a new season of For the Record. And we kick it off right with Congressman Glenn G.T. Thompson from the 5th Congressional District in Pennsylvania. Thanks for being here.
Good morning. It's always great to be with you here. Thanks for the invitation.
I hope we could fill our program because there's not much to talk about because Washington's pretty quiet these days, right?
You may need to do some sequels to this program to cover everything that's going on in Washington right now.
Let's start with the big news maker. The USA Freedom Act finally signed into law by President Barack Obama.
So important. Early on, I was a part of a small group of, it really was a small group of representatives, members of Congress, who pushed back on what I saw as the unauthorized expansion under the Patriot Act, really attack upon our liberties and our freedoms. I mean, we have a certain expectation of privacy in this country. I'm a proud member of the Privacy Caucus in Washington, and our first effort with this failed. It was an amendment we tried to attach to reauthorization of the Patriot Act. We came close, and the fact that we came close, I think, really set the tone for what happened with the past couple weeks, where we're able to actually pass the USA Freedom Act.
Now, this was actually something that was in the process. It actually almost happened prior to the new Congress actually forming in January, but the Senate voted to delay it.
We have been working on this for some time. Ever since that failed amendment vote, we have been working on putting together a standalone piece of legislation that really would roll back the most egregious parts of the Patriot Act, where they really were doing warrantless searches, accumulating mass data without a warrant. And, you know, we have the rule of law in this country, and it's, quite frankly, the USA Freedom Act actually repeals, I believe it's Section 215 of the Patriot Act, and we got good bipartisan support for that, and glad that we were persistent.
Now, in the Senate, there were some challenges right there. Senator Mitch McConnell couldn't get people in line. One of those was Senator Rand Paul. He says it doesn't necessarily go far enough, wanted more limits on Section 215, including like the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Court. What were your thoughts on his actions and maybe some in the Senate who couldn't get it done?
Well, you know, I think Senator Paul's run for president, and people run for president try to make themselves stand out. That said, you know, I respect his efforts, but, you know, the provisions, he was to go after what would be, really would have impacted the lone wolf provision. You know, everything today with the change under the USA Freedom Act requires reasonable cause, reasonable suspicion. So, you know, if I'm communicating with a known terrorist by phone or by email, and we're watching that known terrorist, which I hope we are. I hope this government is tracking those foreign terrorists. But my phone records, my email comes up in that interaction. Well, that probably is sufficient reasonable cause to come back to the courts. Now, whether that's a regular court or whether it's a FISA court, if there's some type of national security at risk here, information getting out to the bad guys, basically, then they have to go make their case, get a warrant. Once you get the warrant, then, you know what? Then listen to my phone calls. You know, read my emails. But the rule of law needs to be applied. We really can't risk, I think, the liberties and freedoms that this country was founded on, nor do we have to. We have the opportunity with just good old-fashioned police work, using the court system to get the information we need to keep Americans safe.
I think Ben Franklin would agree with you on those points. One thing I do have concerns about is when a person like Edward Snowden praises a bill like this but calls for it to go a little bit further. Do you kind of have to take a second look at that, saying if a man like this is praising it, do we have something to worry about?
Well, I come back to pointing out about people that like to bring attention to themselves. So I don't pay a lot of attention to what Mr. Snowden says.
Two things that, along with Charlie Rangel and Representative Ryan in the House, veterans, very important in this country. There's been controversy over the last 4 or 6 years. I mean, we could go back decades with the VA affairs and how that institution is run by the government. Two very important bills that you've introduced.
Yeah, very recently, actually, all based on a crisis that occurs each and every day. An average of 22 veterans every day take their own lives due to suicide in this nation. The first bill is the Vets Act. It actually replicates the STEP law that I wrote, has been implemented. It has helped to reduce the suicide rate among our active duty military by expanding access to telemedicine. This would do that for the VA, serving the millions of veterans today. Proud to do that with Charlie Rangel. Charlie's a proud Korean War veteran. This is an area that he and I really are on the same page and can work together on. And then the Veterans Wellness Act, which I did with a Democratic congressman from Ohio, a good friend of mine, Tim Ryan. That actually, that expands the authority and the support for what we call our VSOs, our Veteran Service Organizations. That's the VFW, the American Legion, AMVETS, you know, there's the whole host of them. They're in the community that serve and work with our veterans each and every day. Allows them to and provide and encourage them to do creative things in terms of therapies they may provide, wellness programs, you know, basically being able to serve the veterans where they are to address their needs. And again, it comes down to keeping our veterans well, keeping them safe, and ultimately eliminating this average of 22 suicide deaths a day that this nation experiences. That's unacceptable, and it's all too preventable.
And that's exactly where I was going with the next question is, these bills are great, these acts are great, but isn't it sad that it kind of takes an act of Congress to do something when you would think this should just be something that's common sense?
It should, but going back to the Vets Act, which is what the STEP Act did, you know, I mean, it's the bureaucracy. It's hard. It was hard for the Department of Defense to get enough qualified professionals to be able to serve the need that's out there. Same thing for the VA. So one of the technical things that the Vets Act does, that the STEP Act does today as law, is that if you're a licensed healthcare professional, you're able to do telemedicine. Through telemedicine, you can contract with the VA and serve that veteran who, I'm in Pennsylvania, they may be in Colorado. Today you can't do that. Today you have to be licensed in the state where that veteran lives. That's too limiting, and the Vets Act would correct that bureaucracy, that barrier.
It's great work. It's commendable on your part, commendable on Representative Ryan and Charlie Rangel's part as well. Don't go anywhere. You are watching For the Record. We have a loaded show, and we might have to do a sequel to this episode. Welcome back to For the Record. Congressman Glenn G.T. Thompson in studio. After a loaded first block, we'll kind of slow it down a little bit. Okay. We'll go into the Clean Water Act of the United States government and the waters of the United States, where the Obama administration is expanding their powers. Yeah.
First of all, let me say the Clean Water Act was a righteous piece of legislation. Over more than 25 years old, 1973, 1974. It was a very good piece of legislation that was focused on navigable waters, clearly. It also recognized the sovereignty of states in terms of addressing non-navigable waters. It was very clear in the division of responsibilities. And it's gone a long ways. I mean, you know, at that point in our history, we had, especially around our cities, we had rivers that were catching on fire because of pollutants. Today, that's not the case. The Clean Water Act has worked. But what the administration is trying to do, and it's through two agencies, the Environmental Protection Agency and the Army Corps of Engineers, they are actually, without legislation, without any congressional authority, so that illegally, they are expanding on the definition of the Clean Water Act. And they're taking away the rights of states, where the states have done a very good job on non-navigable waters. It really is the biggest private property taking in the history of our country. So let me put it, make it personal for folks. If you have any type of property that you own, and on that property you have a ditch that runs with a little bit of water maybe after it rains, not all the time, but briefly. If you've got a low area where water will puddle, mud puddles, and it'll lay there until it absorbs into the atmosphere or absorbs into the ground. If you have a stream that only runs certain times of the year, not year-round, all those are regulated today by the states. But under the regulation that was the Obama administration just last Tuesday issued, that's now under regulation of the EPA and the Army Corps. So for you to use your property, if you have those conditions, and most of us have those conditions in one way or another, you've got to go, technically, you would have to go to the EPA for a permit. They don't have the capacity or the resources to regulate this. So the fact that it's a private property taking and infringes on state rights is most important. But let's just say that we're not successful at stopping them, and I'm working hard to make sure that we do stop them. That means in the future, economic development will come to a screeching halt because the EPA will take I mean, it would,
studies take
it would
years
take
now.
forever to issue these permits.
So you just want to have congressional approval of what they're trying to do and actually keep the states
protecting states'
the states' rights.
And the states, my challenge to the EPA and the Army Corps, show me the problem. Show me where our waterways aren't intensely much cleaner. And you know that they have no science on their side. There's no way to do that. This is an issue that is about control of the federal government, this administration trying to control. In this situation, it's states and private property owners.
Let me bring that into a more local topic, the Susquehanna River. We've had in the past John Arway, director of the Pennsylvania Fish and Boat Commission, on our program. He wants the Susquehanna, especially the lower Susquehanna, deemed an impaired waterway. The state of Pennsylvania hasn't done it. Susquehanna is right here in our backyard. Right. What were your thoughts beyond that? Because eventually those problems from the Chesapeake Bay and down by Harrisburg are going to work their way up into the Shamokin Dam area, up here into the Clearfield area.
Well, we're actually working on this issue. I take the lead on I'm a leader on agriculture, senior member. I chair the conservation, forestry, watersheds, soils, all the environmental issues are under my jurisdiction in agriculture. I work closely with organizations like watershed organizations, Trout Unlimited, great groups.
Yep.
And we leverage federal dollars with state dollars and those local nonprofits to recover our small watersheds. A lot of what we're doing is using abandoned mine land monies, reclamation monies, and some of the impairment that has been talked about really are some of those streams that continue to run orange because of coal mining 100 years ago, before we had better technology.
Yeah, acid mine, big problem.
Yeah, but it's working. You know, we're working. I'm actually working on the reauthorization of the abandoned mine lands, and because we need to continue to clean up. But you know what? It is the designation of the Susquehanna. I don't think I certainly agree with that. I think that things have improved dramatically, and although that is respecting states' rights, that will be up to the state legislature to determine that.
One other thing, the EPA released recently the findings about fracking, saying that it doesn't, I'll get the quote right here, fracking poses no widespread systemic harm to drinking water. You agree with that statement?
Well, it's the science behind it. It's not the first time we've heard that conclusion. We've heard that conclusion in the past from another federal agency, so I'm glad the EPA is actually doing solid research and announcing that. It was really interesting how they left that memo, though, that regulation, because it talked about the vulnerabilities. Well, you know what, we're we're vulnerable sitting here if an asteroid hits us. You know, the odds of it are not great, but is it a vulnerability? Well, I guess it could be determined as such. And so I thought that, I appreciated the strict adherence to science in what they issued, I thought what they talked about vulnerabilities was kind of a political foothold there that probably wasn't necessary.
And that was kind of a drop in the night. There wasn't a lot of media coverage about this was coming out.
Yeah.
It kind of snuck out there. Let me ask you one thing, though. From the time fracking took off from years ago when I was in college, it's not necessarily that I've always said fracking is dangerous. I've always believed that if it was done right, it's a very safe technology,
right,
which this study confirms. But I've also been to cabins where the water was fine for years, fracking came in. Isn't there a worry maybe, I think some companies aren't doing it necessarily the right way, the way it should be done?
Well, I will tell you, that regulation comes under the state with the Department of Environmental Protection, and they have done a great job. Actually, Pennsylvania, under former Governor Tom Corbett, was a leader in terms of the regulation of natural gas production, and specifically the use of hydrofracking technologies. And so, I would, if there are issues that people have, they need to address that with DEP. I think what we're finding is that there are other explanations. DEP has found other conclusions whenever someone has identified their concerns. We do have, I mentioned abandoned mines. We have a lot of coal mine seams in this country, in the state of Pennsylvania. So we have a lot of naturally migrating methane that comes from that. We don't have, where we have really good rigid regulations for production of natural gas, we have very few regulations for putting in a water well. And so that a lot of times that's where people get themselves into difficulties in terms of how they those wells are drilled and put in.
Yeah, it's definitely a fragile line about where do you have to stop the economy to protect your natural resources at the same time. Don't go anywhere. You're watching For the Record. Welcome back to For the Record. Time to wrap up the first episode of the new season with Congressman Glenn G.T. Thompson. Get into a hot topic that took place this week on Capitol Hill. Negotiations with Iran, not necessarily on the nuclear talk front, but on 3 Americans that are being held and an alleged 4th that the country knows where it's at.
Yeah, we need our citizens back. And I think I've been calling on the administration to be forthright in all the negotiations. They've been at the table with Iran, and I would hope that the opening salvo that the administration has been doing, and I don't have information that really confirms that they have, but they need to be very clear that we have any American citizens that are being held by Iran, they need to be released, that we need to bring them home. And then, then the negotiation should go from there.
Isn't this a little bit of a saber rattling from the Islamic Republic over there that, and kind of like an eye poke to the U.S.?
I think so. I mean, 1979. I mean, this is just reliving history, where when the regime that is there now, that's when they took over. What was the first thing that they did? They took hostage American citizens, and that's what they have today. These individuals, these American citizens, are hostages, and we need the administration to be forthright and just to be firm. You know what? This is unacceptable, and if they want to be at the negotiation table, they need to send our people home. I
want to bring up one person in particular, Robert Livingston. The CIA's admitted he was a former operative. Iran has said they don't know where he's at. Now, this comes on the heels of Bo Bergdahl, where we traded 4 prisoners for 1, and now he's being charged. His Article 32 hearing just got pushed back for a dishonorable discharge and desertion. Now, there's a CIA operative that we haven't brought back, and this is after we were told we don't leave people behind to get Bo back.
Exactly, unacceptable. And I have to tell you, the one thing that this administration does not do well is negotiate, because all of those operatives from ISIS or Al-Qaeda, I guess it was Al-Qaeda that we traded, they're all back in the field now, fighting for Al-Qaeda, leading from Al-Qaeda. They're filling leadership voids for Al-Qaeda. So that said, yeah, absolutely, that gentleman, we leave no man behind. It's been our mantra. It's one of the things I'm working on right now in terms of making sure we increase what we do just for all our MIAs and POWs, leading the effort of, those soldiers we've left behind in World War I, World War II, Vietnam, 16,000, and it's time to ramp up and bring those folks home as well.
Changing gears, making a hard turn to the right is what I should say. The presidential field for the upcoming election. It's easier to say, as you said off camera, it's easier to say who's not in than actually who is in. Your thoughts so far on the field?
Well, it's going to grow. I think that's what we can really look forward to on both sides of the aisle. I think after some of the revelations with the CNN poll and some other things with the Clinton Foundation this past week, right away we saw the governor of Rhode Island, a Democrat, jump into that primary. I think it will be easier in the future to name who is not in the presidential election than who is, because those numbers on both the Republican and Democrat side are going to increase. I don't have a favorite horse at this point. I'm doing what I would expect every American to do at this point: be discerning, really look and see what the record is. What I know for sure is America needs strong leadership. America has appeared weak, and because of appearing weak, bullies and thugs and those who do evil, from Russia to Iran to ISIS, have just done terrible things to innocent people. When America appears strong, those things don't happen. Those things don't happen. And so we need strong leadership, and that's so, I just hope and pray Americans will be discerning, and we'll do what I'm doing, and I'm just checking out every candidate.
Let me ask you about one statement. Martin O'Malley, the former governor of Maryland, on the Democratic side, he said about a month ago that the president of the office of the president is not imperialistic. And what he was referring to was it should not be a Bush, it should not be a Clinton, that the country needed a new phase. Would you agree with that statement?
No, I think you elect the best possible person. And so I actually, when you were saying that, I didn't hear the quote, but as you said it, I was thinking imperialistic in terms of not being a dictator. And unfortunately, from the waters of the U.S. to, to attacks on our religious freedoms, to just all the things that the current administration has been doing, that really has appeared imperialistic. Circumventing the authority of Congress, the responsibility of the legislative branch, and trying to dictate as an emperor almost from these administrative agencies, and what the IRS has been doing in terms of really denying nonprofit status and making it difficult for folks who come across as conservative organizations. I mean, it is time for that, clearly, to change.
Two-word answer. Do the Republicans win the presidency in the next election?
Yes, sir.
There you go. Putting you on the spot a little bit, you gave a speech this past week. There's a certain ice cream factory up there in State College. It might be world famous. Take a look at the clip of you speaking on the House floor.
Penn State is home to the largest university creamery in the United States, using
150
more than
years.
4.5 million pounds of milk each year, supporting Pennsylvania's robust dairy industry. Mr. Speaker, as a proud graduate of Penn State University, I congratulate the Berkeley Creamery on 150 years of creating countless memories, and especially the hardworking student employees and the 23 full-time employees that make the operation such a great success.
Such a great place to get ice cream. It's so good. Your favorite ice cream flavor up there?
Mine, Peachy Paterno.
You know, that's my favorite too.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, I can tell you the majority leader of the United States House of Representatives, Kevin McCarthy, he's from Bakersfield, California, a friend of mine, he loves the chocolate. And I'm actually, every so often, I stop at a creamery and I buy a couple half gallons and pack it in dry ice. And by the end of the day, he's enjoying a big bowl of creamery ice cream. Now, he was very specific to say, though, that this is his favorite ice cream outside of his hometown of Bakersfield, California. A true elected official.
There's the caveat.
Yeah.
Congressman Thompson, thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you for watching at home. Enjoy the rest of your day.